Okay, welcome to episode 58 of the iPad podcast by Lex at Macsfuture, and today is June 12th, 2011. And of course, it's been a really interesting week for people who are into the iPad and into Apple things. So let's go into what's the biggest news about the iPad. And obviously the biggest news is that iOS 5 was announced on Monday earlier this week at WWDC, and it was quite an event, so let's go to it. Okay, everybody, so the big news was that iOS 5 was announced on Monday of this week at WWDC. It was one of three things that were announced, and one of the nice things about the conference was that Steve Jobs appeared out of his leave of absence for illness, and, you know, he's looking thin, but he still looks like he's, you know, vibrant, and I'm really psyched that he's back because he's such a great person, I think, you know, for giving us Apple and giving us the iPad and giving us everything. And, you know, he's in a way kind of my hero. So Steve Jobs, you know, thanks for coming back and introducing three big things. Lion, which is the next operating system for the app for the Macintosh, iOS 5, which is the next operating system for the iPad, iPod Touch, and the iPhone, and then iCloud, which is really for both of those operating systems. So let's talk about iOS 5, and this is something that was introduced by Scott Forstall. And the thing about iOS 5, the next operating system for the iPhone and the iPad and the iPod Touch, is that it's going to be released, they say, sometime towards the end of the summer, early September maybe. And right now, earlier this week, they released the beta of iOS 5 to people who are part of the developers program, which you too can be part of just for $99 a year. I'm part of it. And let's just say I downloaded and installed iOS 5 beta on both my iPhone and my iPad 2. But I'm not going to talk about what I know because I'm subject to a non-disclosure agreement. But I can talk about what's been publicly reported by Apple and what's been publicly reported by other people, other websites, including websites that appear to violate the NDA. But that's okay. I can talk about it. So here's the thing. iOS 5, you're going to love it because it has zillions of things that are going to make your iPad even cooler, even better to use, and even more productive. And Apple touts on their website that there are over 200 new features in iOS 5. So there's a lot of things to talk about that's going to really transform your iPad. And at WWDC, when Scott Forstall was doing his announcement, he really highlighted 10 things. The theme of the presentation was that, you know, with Lion, 10 things were highlighted, and with iOS 5, 10 things were highlighted. And the 10 things for the iOS are really, I think, going to, you know, really boost the iPad and make it better. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing. The first thing is the notification center. Now, this is huge because, you know, people who had Android products were always sort of poo-pooing Apple and the iOS, saying, oh, you don't have some unified, you know, notification screen on front. And Apple has now given us a notifications screen. So basically, there's this drop-down window that drops down when you just tap at the top of the the notification bar at the top that tells you your battery status and your Wi-Fi status of your iPad, and you just swipe down, and this notification center pops down, and apps that you've said you want notifications from, all the notifications are there unified. So, and you can decide to choose which apps you want in the notification center. And I find this really handy because, you know, you could have your weather notifications there, and if you want to check the weather, you pop down that very quickly. Or let's say you follow some stocks. You know, you could put the stock notifications in the notification window, and when you pull that down, that'll be there. Or for example, your calendar. you could have your calendar notifications in there. So you just swipe down, you know, from the top of the screen of your iPad, and you know, it's all there. And the other thing is, notifications don't interrupt you. They, you know, you have this notification screen. So this is really, I think, a huge improvement for the iPad. And you know, you just swipe to get your notifications, including from the lock screen. So this is nice. So when it's in lock screen, you can also swipe to get your notifications. You can swipe to listen or check voicemails with a swipe from the lock screen. So now you can do a lot from the lock screen. Now what's interesting about the iPad though is the iPad 2, you don't really usually have a lock screen, because if you have one of these smart covers, whenever you open a smart cover, it unlocks the screen and puts the iPad on. So in a way, having notifications over the lock screen isn't really as important if you have the iPad 2 with the smart cover. That's at least my take on it. The other cool thing is that, you know, with the notification center, really, you know, like I said, it's just that you can organize all your notifications in one place. So this is a big, big plus. Okay, so the second thing they really highlighted was iMessage. And iMessage is really a new app for the iPad. We've already had the Message app for the iPhone, but now you have the iMessage app for both the iPhone and the iPad. And what the iMessage app is, it's essentially a means on an iPad to have text messaging, but these are unique text messaging that are Apple text messaging. And basically, for free, you can now, within iMessage, text message for free to anybody else with the iMessage app. So anybody with an iOS device that's that's running iOS 5, you can text message to. Now I really hope they bring this iMessage service to the Macintosh and also open it up. It'd be great if you could open it up to third parties. But the key thing here is these messages are free. Remember, the phone companies, they totally rip you off by charging extra for text messaging, even if you have an unlimited internet plan. That's why on my iPhone, I shut off regular text messaging long ago. I had the AT&T block that port, so I couldn't receive or get any text messaging, because I'm so appalled by the idea that the phone companies could charge you $30 for unlimited internet, and yet at the same time charge you more money for texting. And texting doesn't really take up much data. And Apple has done a really fantastic thing here, because this iMessage app is really cool. You can have running messages back and forth by anybody else who you're iMessaging. And it treats, well, I mean, I don't think it makes a difference for the iPad, because for the iPad you couldn't get texting before. But now you have texting through iMessages. But on the iPhone, the iMessage messages to somebody else who has iMessage are highlighted in blue, and I think regular texting on the iPhone is green. But on the iPad, you're only going to have regular iMessage texting, so it's always going to be blue. So this actually makes my iPad even closer to like replacing my iPhone and my phone bill, my cell phone bill, as a communications device. You know, someone asked me, hey, can you make your iPad into a phone, a 3G phone? And there is a way to do it using the Google Voice app and Google Voice service and, what is it, the Talkatone app. But that's for making voice over IP calls. The beauty of iMessage is that you can now text everybody who's got like an iPhone and running a iOS 5 or an iPad or an iPod Touch. So, you know, once this opens up to more people, this is going to be very powerful, and the phone companies must absolutely hate Apple for doing this. So you're going to love this. I mean, my wife and I, we never really text each other, but she has an iPhone 4, and she's going to have obviously the iPhone 5, iOS 5 on it. And I could see us now as a family starting to text each other through iMessage. And again, I really think it has to come to the Mac also, and then it'll be in a way a replacement for iChat. Okay, so the third thing that Apple announced is a new Newsstand app, and this is sorely needed because currently everyone has magazines and newspaper apps they've downloaded in the iPad, and the one thing that I really can't stand about them is that they're all over the place and they're all designed differently. And so Apple's going to come out, it's going to be like the iBook app, but you're going to have a Newsstand app. So all your news magazines and all your news subscription newspapers and magazines, they're all going to be one place, and you can subscribe to these newspaper apps through the Newsstand, and they'll be in your Newsstand. So if you've got various magazines and newspapers, they'll all be right there. And I also think that Apple has an SDK or APIs for people to create news and magazine apps, and I think it's going to have some uniformity in it so that there's a common design and a common layout. At least that's my hope, because my big problem with a lot of the newspapers and magazines are they're just so radically different from each other in terms of how they function. And I understand having design like color and spacing and fonts be different, but it's another thing to just have one app makes you pull things this way to look at the next page. Another app makes you pull the other way to get video or see things, and it gets really confusing. So this Newsstand app should hopefully smooth things out. All right, so the fourth thing that Apple highlighted is the Reminders app, and this is new both on the iPhone and the iPad. And basically Reminders is like a great to-do app. So, this is obviously going to piss off a lot of developers because there's a lot of to-do apps for the iPhone and the iPad, and now Apple has a really great one. And it's a very simple design. You can create sort of categories of to-dos and have then lots of to-dos in those categories. And it syncs with iCal, so the reminders work with iCal. But I'll tell you, the really cool thing about the Reminders app, it has location reminders. Now this is really wild, and this I guess works with the iPad through the Wi-Fi, geolocation, or the GPS and the 3G if you have the one with GPS and 3G in the iPad 2 or the original iPad. So this is really cool. So what does this mean, this geolocation reminders? Well, when you create, let's say you create a reminder like, let's say you left your son left a toy at his cousin's house. So you could create a reminder, retrieve the toy from my cousin's house. And then instead of tying that reminder to a date or time, you can tie that reminder to a location. So what you do is you go into your contacts and pick your cousin's house as the geolocation reminder, and you could pick that you want to be reminded when you leave or when you arrive at that location. So how cool is that? I could put it in a location that says next time I'm at the cousin's house, remind me to take the child's toy back. Or if you lent a book to someone and you have their location, you can have it remind you when you're at that location. To me, this is the stuff of Buck Rogers. I mean, it's really a cool feature, and I can't wait to play with that. So that's really nice. Okay, so the fifth thing that they announced about iOS 5, the fifth big thing, is that there's Twitter integration in the iOS 5. Now, Twitter is this great, social media app that allows you to send little messages about things that you're interested in. Your followers read them, and you can follow people. And Twitter's great for communicating to people. I love Twitter. So basically, Twitter's now built into the settings, and so you can put your login for your Twitter account into the settings, And you can actually add in more than one account. And then you don't have to, like, a lot of apps have Twitter integration. But what this means is that the apps can just feed into the settings and capture the Twitter that you logged into in the settings. And also this means that Twitter is now built into things like Safari, Photos, Camera, YouTube, and Maps. And so let's say you're in Safari and you're reading an article on the web. You can now, in Safari, when that send button, well, that send button now has a tweet button in there, and you can tweet your article. The same for photos, that now when you choose send in Photos, there's a Twitter button, and you can send it to Twitter, and the same with the camera, and the same with YouTube. And so this is going to be a huge help for Twitter. I mean, Twitter has 200 million users so far, and this is really going to make it better. So, basically, Twitter's going to be just integrated in all the apps, and it's going to make it easier for third-party developers to integrate Twitter into their app. So this is a really big win for Apple and also Twitter. I think it's part of Apple's strategy, really, of competing with Facebook and Google, because Apple is desperately trying to get into the social networking aspect of it. The Game Center app is social networking, and the Ping app for iTunes is social networking, but they really haven't taken off. Well, Twitter has taken off, at least with 200 million users. And so Apple, I wouldn't be surprised if Apple goes one step further and actually acquires Twitter at some point. So this is cool also. Okay, so the fifth thing they announced is there's improvement to the camera app. And actually I should couple that with the sixth thing that they announced, which that there's an improvement to the Photos app. Because the camera app and the Photos app, pretty much go together. So let's start with the Photo app. So the first big thing is now you're going to be able to access the camera on the iPhone right from the locked screen just by double-clicking the home button. And then a camera icon will come up. So this is particularly good for people who have the iPhone and they want to take a quick picture and they don't want to open up the iPhone. They can just double click. Now this isn't a feature though for the iPad, but what is a feature for the iPad? Oh, by the way, let me tell you, for the iPhone, the other thing they've done is now you can take a picture with the volume button, and I think this works with the iPad too. I'm not sure, but on the iPhone, it doesn't really work well, because look in this picture. In the iPhone, basically, they have you holding it horizontally, and they have the volume button on the right side. But if you held it like you do in this picture, your fingers would block the camera, because the camera's on the bottom right-hand corner over here. I'm swirling my mouse. And so I think they're going to have to change the button on the iPhone in the future. But this is an iPad show. Let's talk about the iPad. So the big thing is that within the camera function, after you take a picture, well, when you're taking a picture, you now have grid lines. You can turn on grid lines to help you compose the shot. You can also pinch to zoom, to zoom in. And you can also have autofocus and auto exposure. You just touch and hold to lock focus and exposure. And you can also, I think, double tap to switch between AF and AE exposure. So, now here's the thing about this. This is really helpful because there's a lot of camera apps out there that have added these features, because remember the camera app for a long time was just plain vanilla. So now you have these cool additions to the camera app. You've got zooming ability through the pinch and zoom. You've got autofocus and auto exposure and grid lines. So some people might not buy these third-party photo apps for $1 or $2 because this might be enough. Now let's go to Photos. And remember, a lot of people buy the photo apps or the camera apps because it also helps them edit the photos that they take. And now the Photos app has much more, useful features in it. So let's look at the big things. You can auto enhance a photo that's got this sort of magic wand thing. You can also tap. You can also remove red eye, by tapping, I guess, on faces and hitting the red eye button. You can also rotate the photos, and you can also crop them. And you can also adjust your photos just with the crop and rotate. So this is huge. Now, I'll tell you, particularly the rotate and the crop is particularly huge for me because, I take some screenshots and then they don't come up straight, and I want to, I want to edit them. And I've always had to tap into the Photo app through other apps like Adobe's PE, free PE app, which allows you to edit photos. And it always frustrated me that I couldn't do some basic editing of photos in the Photos app. And now you can. So between the Photos app and the Camera app, I think a lot of people are not going to buy these third-party photo and camera apps. And also, I think what it's going to do is going to really put pressure on the third-party photo and camera apps to really add even more features and lower the price, because Apple has now a pretty robust photo app. Okay, so the seventh thing that they highlight is changes to Safari. And the biggest changes to Safari are really in the iPad version of Safari. So the first big thing is that you now have tabbed browsing in Safari and the iPad. And so this makes the iPad even more like a regular computer. So this is great now. You've got tabs basically underneath the address bar of the iPad. And the people who have been using iOS 5, let's say, think it's really a great addition. It makes it much quicker than pressing on that sort of tile button and having to choose from various pages and then only being able to see one. That's the first, I think, really big thing about Safari. The other thing is now there's a reader button in the address bar. And what that means is, you have that reader button in Safari on the Mac, and if you click on that, it basically takes some article that you're reading on the web, whether it's in a newspaper or in a blog, and strips out a lot of the advertising. It puts it nice, easy to read format with nice fonts. And so, we're looking here at Apple's site showing the before and after, and this is huge. I mean, this is huge on the iPhone because the iPhone has such a small screen. It makes reading articles much easy, but it really makes it beautiful on the iPad because you can go to some website and click the reader button. And I think the reader button bypasses a lot of the blocked sites that, where they, like sites like New York Times, which has this blocking thing come up if you don't pay for a subscription. And I think if you go to an article and that thing comes up, you just click the reader button and you still see the article. So the other thing is now Safari also has a reading list section to the to the icon and window that has bookmarking and home screen. There's now an add to reading list, and this will sync with your MobileMe or iCloud, and we'll get to that, iCloud accounts, so it'll sync with other Safari. So this is a lot other Safaris on like the Mac or some other devices. So this add to reading list means you could take an article and add it to your reading list. And then you can organize your reading list. So it's a lot like Instapaper in some respect, because Instapaper is that great service by Marco Arment and the app on the iPhone and the iPad where you can save articles from the web into Instapaper and it'll be stripped out of, of nice, stripped out of ads and stuff like that. The one thing that this doesn't have, though, that Instapaper has, is that Instapaper allows you to read the articles offline when you're not connected to the internet. And this Apple reading list in Safari doesn't do that. It's just really, it's almost like, I don't know, in some way it's just like having a bookmark. It's almost like having a temporary bookmark to some article. It's a little better than that. And I wouldn't be surprised if eventually Apple allows you to read the articles off-site like Instapaper. So, okay, so let's go on to the next one. Okay, so the next thing that Apple really highlighted about iOS 5 is that the iPad and the iPhone will now be PC free, also the iPod Touch. What this means, now remember, up till now, if you buy an iPhone or an iPad or an iPod Touch, to activate it after you buy it, it has to be hooked up to a computer running iTunes, and you activate it through iTunes. Now, some people who don't have a computer with iTunes, they've been activating their iPad or iPhone or iPod Touch at the Apple Store. But you're then stuck in terms of you couldn't update your operating system unless you went to an Apple Store and hooked it up to iTunes, or unless you went to a friend's house and hooked it up to iTunes. So everybody really had to have a computer too. So this was the argument for why the iPad is not a good substitute for a standalone computer, in that you can't even activate it unless you have a computer. Well, that is all coming to an end with iOS 5. With iOS 5, Apple says you will no longer need a computer to own an iPad or an iPhone or iPod Touch. You'll be able to activate and set up your device wirelessly right out of the box. And also you'll be able to download free iOS software updates directly on your device. And you'll be able to back up and restore your device automatically using iCloud. Now we'll get to that, because that's also part of the big announcement, which is Apple is now going to change MobileMe to a free service where you still get Find My iPhone and email and calendars, but you also get for free 5 gigabytes free of storage, and you're going to be able to back up your iDevices to the cloud, to iCloud. So that means really backing up your settings and your data in your apps. Now what's interesting, iCloud, I guess we can talk about iCloud here briefly, which is that iCloud also is going to store all the music and apps that you already have bought from Apple and that you will buy from Apple. They don't count against the 5 gigabytes, and they're always going to be up there for you to download again. So think about that. That means all your music that you bought from Apple and your apps, they're already up there in the cloud. So you're just really backing up the data that you've accumulated in your apps. So this is going to be huge. It's really going to, I think, result in more iPhone and iPad sales, because I bet you there's a lot of people who are on the fence in getting an iPad. What if there's some people who couldn't really justify owning a computer, let's say, for $600 or $700 and an iPad for $600 or $700? Now they can rationalize just getting an iPad and not having any other computer. And so I think Apple's going to be able to sell the iPad to a lot of people and say, this is your computer. You do not need another computer. This is a really easy computer to use. You do not need one. Now for the iPhone, they're going to be able to sell it in a lot of countries where people don't have computers, and a lot of people in the United States who don't have computers, and say, look, you don't need a computer for this device. You can get an iPhone and run it without a computer. So this is a total win for Apple. This is something that Apple's competitors, particularly Google and people who sell Android devices and make them, have been complaining about Apple, saying that it's, you're handicapped, that you're stuck with a computer. And now you're not, with this PC-free activation and syncing and backing up. Okay, so what are some other things that have been updated? Well, the Mail app in the iPad is much better now. It gives you more flexibility. You're going to be able to format text using bold and italic, and also you have underlined fonts, so you can do much more with Mail in terms of formatting. You can also, do all sorts of multiple indents in the text of your message, and you can apparently can drag and rearrange names in the address field, and you can flag messages and add and delete mailbox folders. So this is a huge improvement with the Mail app. The Calendar app also gets an update. You can now see, your iPad and check your schedule in week view, and you can tap and create an event and drag to adjust the time and duration. You can add and rename and delete calendars directly from your device, and you can even view event attachments without leaving the Calendar app. So it makes the Calendar app much more useful. The other big thing is now Wi-Fi syncing. So let's say you don't want to sync to the cloud and you do have a computer. So now you don't have to plug in by USB your iPhone or iPad to your computer, your Mac. You can just do Wi-Fi syncing. Now the way it works is every time you plug your iOS device into a power source, it will automatically sync. I think though, even if you don't plug into a power source, you can go into the settings and just say backup now. But this is huge because people don't like cords, and this further cuts the cord. Now also the Game Center gets updated. You can get you can post your own profile picture. You can meet your match with new friend recommendations based on your gameplay. So look, I'm not a big Game Center person, but obviously Apple's trying to improve that. So let's go to some of the game-changing stuff, okay? Well, this we've known for a while. One is multitasking gestures for iPad. And what this means, and you could have activated this before if you had Xcode, which is you can now swipe between apps just using forefinger swipe left or right. So if you've launched several apps and you've used them, you can just quickly cut to them by swiping left and right, and you just switch from one app to another. Now I've been doing this for months because this little hack was available because I guess Apple activated it in Xcode, and you didn't have to jailbreak your iPad or have any beta before, and you could do this. And also you can pinch to return to the home screen and swipe left or right to, like I said, to switch between apps. So that's nice. Let's talk about the absolute killer feature, and the absolute killer feature is AirPlay mirroring for the iPad 2. So this, I could talk at length about this, but this is huge. What this means now is you're going to be able to, with an iPad 2, to wirelessly mirror everything that's on your iPad 2 to an Apple TV, I guess an Apple TV 2. So even if you rotate your iPad from portrait or landscape mode, it'll rotate on the screen, zooming in and zooming out. So what this does is really make the iPad, together with the Apple TV 2, a total speakers presentation device. Now, let's say you're a lawyer in court with a jury presentation. You could take your little Apple II and hook it up to the courtroom's AV system of monitors and displays and projectors, and you could just walk around with your iPad and just show exhibits and show your PowerPoint or Keynote, and without being tied to any cord. Now you're going to need with this a Wi-Fi network. Now I said this in the other podcast, and I think that Apple should eventually come out with an Apple TV 2 that has Wi-Fi networking built into it. Because this is huge. How about in the classroom? How about if you have a teacher now with a little Apple TV 2 in the classroom hooked up to a monitor, the teacher can just walk around with the iPad and show all sorts of lesson plans and PowerPoints and keynotes and stuff like that. So this, to me, this is one of the most exciting things. And how about game playing? What does this do now? We know that Real Racing 2, which is that great racing game, which already had hardware mirroring to the Apple TV. They announced they're going to like quickly, I guess, go for this wireless mirroring. And that's going to be great for racing, because your racing games and other games, they're all going to take advantage of this wireless mirroring. So, I mean, that's, to me, that's like a huge like breakthrough, and I can't wait. Now, the other thing is accessibility. Apple has improved a lot of accessibility things. Now, two of the coolest things in terms of accessibility are you're going to be able to assign custom vibrations to contacts. So, well, I don't know. Does the iPad vibrate, or is it just the? No, I guess just the iPhone vibrates. But there's another accessibility thing that's really cool, and that's you're going to be able to design your own shortcuts, gestures. So you're going to be able to, like, program the iPad to make gestures with your fingers. Like, you could have an X over the iPad, and that's going to be a shortcut for something. Apple hasn't revealed what things you're going to be able to shortcut, but that's going to be huge, because that's something I think people had in the jailbreak community and also the Android community. But Apple, it looks like they're going to have that in both the iPad and the iPhone, which is the ability to design your own gestures that then trigger different things on the iPad and the iPhone, like the activation of apps, that sort of thing. Okay, so we talked about iCloud before, but that was part of the big presentation by Apple, and iCloud is just going to make the iPad more and more independent. So the big thing is, with iCloud, you're going to be able to back up your iPad to this free iCloud service where you're going to have 5 gigabytes of storage for free. Now, remember, your apps don't count against that storage, and another thing won't count against that storage, your music. Because whatever music, if you have 20,000 songs or up to 20,000 songs on your computer, and Apple will let you have those same 20,000 songs up in the cloud, ready to download to your iPad or other device. So now you're not going to be worried that your iPad only has, 16 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes or 64 gigabytes of storage, because you're going to be able to download music from your storage on the cloud, and that's going to be for $25 a year if you want to have the ability to store up to 20,000 songs on iCloud. So for music lovers, they're no longer gonna. Right now I'm no longer gonna have to worry about like constantly figuring out what music to sync to my iPad. I'm just gonna have it up there. And also, one of the big things with iTunes now in your music app. Apple separated out. You no longer have an iPod app. Rather, you have a music app, and also now there's a video app on the iPhone, sort of like you have it on the iPad. And so you can now delete your music and video out of your video and music apps. So, to me, this was a real pain until iOS 5 came along, because, I would listen to a podcast or listen to some music, and I don't want it anymore on my iPad or iPhone, and I'd have to wait till I get back to the computer to get rid of it. And now I can just delete it straight out. But the other big thing about iCloud is that iCloud is just going to allow you to sync all sorts of apps with each other through the iCloud service. So iCloud replaces MobileMe. Now in MobileMe, you've already been able to do that, right? Because your Safari bookmarks and contacts and calendars get all synced through MobileMe. But now like any app can actually sync through iCloud, because Apple is going to make iCloud an API that developers can use. So developers are going to be taking advantage of iCloud, so that, you know, if you have an app on one iPad, it can sync with another iPad or an iPhone. So it's sort of like, you know, the way a lot of apps use Dropbox now. So if you have Dropbox service, an app on your iPad and iPhone, a lot of apps, like let's say 1Password, take advantage of that cloud networking. And my, you know, my 1Password app on my Mac syncs with my 1Password app on my iPad and my 1Password app on my iPhone, exchanging the data all without me docking my devices, just wirelessly. So we're going to see that, and I think that's going to be huge. Just truly making your iDevice ecosystem truly independent. Now, the other cool thing about iCloud that helps the iPad is your photos are going to be sort of free and getting on your iPad without having to constantly sync. Now, I don't know about you, but I take most of my photos with the iPhone 4. The iPad 2's cameras aren't that good for taking pictures, but the iPad 2 is fabulous for viewing pictures. So I usually dump photos that I've taken on my iPhone into the iPad, either via the iTunes syncing on a Mac or via that camera connector, where I take a USB cord and the camera connector and connect it, you know, between the iPhone and the iPad and transfer the photos. Well, that's all a thing of the past, because Apple now has something called PhotoStream. And basically the way PhotoStream works is you take a photo with your iOS device, let's say with your iPhone, and then it goes up to iCloud and the new photos are automatically sent to the iCloud, and then iCloud pushes your photos to your devices automatically. So it'll go from your iPhone to your, you know, Mac or your iPad automatically. And I think what it does is it pushes the most recent 1,000 photos. So, you know, this is great. I mean, this is just an easy way to share your photos with your other devices. Now, one thing that would be nice is PhotoStream. If PhotoStream, you know, could be subscribed to by like your friends and relatives, because, you know, that would be a real killer device. Now, PhotoStream also works with the Apple TV, so it, you know, it goes to the Apple TV. Now, I hope they do what MobileMe did with photos, which it allowed people who don't have your account login to still subscribe to your photo feed or your gallery feed on MobileMe. And so I hope with, I don't think they said it, but I hope with PhotoStream they'll be able to do that. So, you know, this really just sort of takes away people's concern about data storage on the iPad. Now, another thing they talked about iCloud was documents in the cloud. So again, I was talking about how Apple's making this iCloud API available to developers, but it gives an example of how you would use Pages with iCloud on the iPad and the iPhone. So you could create a document on your iPhone, and then it would be stored and synced to iCloud, and then it would push the changes to your iPad version of Pages. So, you know, basically this whole thing of, you know, sometimes at work I email documents back to me at home and then open them up and edit them and then email them back, where with this sort of syncing through the cloud, you know, you're not going to be emailing as much. You're just going to have your documents all over the place, and they'll just sync, and the updates will sync. And, you know, this is just the future, really. So, Okay, so another cool thing which makes your iPad independent from your computer or your Mac is that apps are now going to be synced automatically wirelessly. So if you want to, you're going to be able to, let's sometimes, like, I buy an app for my iPhone and I also want it on my iPad. Well, you're not going to need to go to your computer. Once you buy it, you'll have access to it online through your app store. It'll show you your purchase history and you can re-download something. But the cool thing is you can, I guess you're going to have a setting where you could tell iCloud to automatically push any new app you buy to all your devices. So this is kind of handy. Instead of like having to download it again, it's almost like the hardware sync thing that iTunes does. Because I think the default in iTunes is if I buy an app on the iPhone, it'll end up on my iPad unless I uncheck it. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so another cool syncing improvement is with iBooks. Just like with the apps, now you can basically say, once I buy a book in iBook, I want it automatically downloaded and pushed to my other devices too. Right now, it doesn't push automatically. There is a beta available now, both for this app store pushing and syncing, and for the iBook syncing. But this is really cool that you're going to be able to say, no, if I buy the book and download it on my iPad, I want to download it on my iPhone. And also it's, improving the syncing between your reading experience on the iPhone and the iPad. So, you'll be able to leave a bookmark. It'll appear in the same book on your other devices, the same with highlighting text or making a note. Now, I said some sites are already sort of showing stuff that could theoretically violate their NDAs, but MacRumors had some videos up showing how great the iPad wireless display mirroring is. And here's a video that appeared on their website showing it, and it's very cool. Let's watch and listen. So the guy's activating it, and let's see, what is he doing? He's launching mirroring. See, there's a button now that appears when you go send to Apple TV, and it says, do you want to mirror? And there it goes. It's mirroring. Very cool. Look, he's moving it around on his iPad, and it's mirroring on the Apple TV. Now he's showing what's on his iPad, and he's going to send it wirelessly to the big monitor. So, all right, like he's even streaming a movie wirelessly, but we could do that anyway, so I'm not sure why he's doing that. I mean, the real beauty of the wireless mirroring is really that anything, you could be working on a spreadsheet and it will go to the other monitor. So very cool. Now, a lot of people like to use the iPad, particularly the iPad 2 with the GPS, as a great navigation device, because you got this big screen, you mount it on the dashboard or the side of the seat next to you on a car. But there's other improvements in iOS 5 that affect it, which is now you can see multiple routes on a map supported in iOS 5. And so you can select multiple routes in the Google Maps, and they have screenshots on MacRumors showing like the map showing multiple routes. So this could be, a great improvement and sort of helping make the default Google Map a great navigation tool. Well, another feature in iOS 5 that's going to help make your iPad and iPhone even more independent is something that 9to5Mac found, which I also saw linked to by MacRumors, and that is that Apple will now let you set up your airport or time capsule device from your iOS device. So apparently there's a screenshot here of a Wi-Fi network device setting feature in iOS 5, which would allow you to set up your base station and Apple Airport or time capsule. Now, what would be great is if you could just back up your iPad or iPhone, not to iCloud, but to your time capsule. Wouldn't that be cool? And I bet you they come out with that feature. That might be something that Apple is going to reveal a little later. There had been a rumor before WWDC that Apple was going to be announcing new time capsules. And there were rumors that time capsules, the current ones, are in short supply. And there is a rumor that this week there's going to be some sort of hardware updates, maybe new MacBook Airs. But I wouldn't be surprised if they reveal new time capsules that allow you to back up the iPhone or iPad directly to them without a computer. And that would make total sense, because the whole plan here is to make the iPad completely independent from Macs. Now, one of the things that was bumming out a lot of people about WWDC is that Apple did not announce that it had made any sort of deal with Nuance, which is the great voice recognition company, that makes Dragon, or that what it's done with Siri, which was that great voice recognition search app company that they bought about a year ago, and what they've done to integrate it. And then there were stories out, rumors that Nuance's integration with iOS wasn't yet completely done, so they dropped it from WWDC. But now there was a story on June 11th in MacRumors that there's clues that there is a Nuance-Apple partnership. Specifically, the story is called iOS Speech Recognition Settings Confirm Nuance-Apple Partnership. And there's a screenshot here in the iOS speech settings, and it shows Nuance dictation on or off, Nuance endpoints. So basically, they were posted on Twitter by something called @ChronicWire, and it reveals hidden Nuance preference found in the latest internal iOS builds that confirm that Apple has been actively working on building in speech recognition into iOS. It says rumors of Nuance-Apple partnership have been heavy in the weeks prior to WWDC, though no announcements were made during the keynote. So it goes on to say the source of the screenshots @Chronic and @Sonny Dixon has been known to have legitimate sources in the past, so it seems certain that Apple is actively working on bringing Nuance speech recognition to iOS. So that's great news, because speech recognition after touch is the next big thing in terms of interface, if you think about it. Touch is so intuitive that kids can, latch onto it. Because remember, for years we've been using mice and keyboards, and a touch screen is very intuitive. You don't have to really know much to know how to touch something and move it around. But speaking is even more intuitive. So imagine if we could be just like in Star Trek. And we sort of already are like Star Trek. I mean, today I was using the Google app to look for things, and I'd press the microphone button, and I would say I'm looking for, I don't know, this or that over here, and it would take me straight to it. And so I think we're going to see more of that with the iPhone and the iPad. A lot of sophisticated speech integration. Okay, towards the end of WWDC, Apple quietly announced something that really affects all of us who use the iPad and is really great news. And, I'm looking now at the MacRumors website about it. But essentially what Apple did was it reversed course on its famous in-app subscription policy. Now, if you remember, several months ago, in February, Apple introduced App Store subscriptions. And this really pissed off a lot of magazine and newspaper publishers, because the subscription service that it outlined was that Apple would take 30% cut of all subscriptions, and it required that anybody who had a subscription service in the App Store, in an app, had to offer that subscription at the same price or lower than if that subscription was offered outside the App Store. On top of that, there were requirements that Apple would not share the information with the subscriber or with the publisher unless the subscriber specifically released the information. But the thing that really pissed people off, particularly the publishers and content providers, was that Apple was taking a 30% cut, and Apple was insisting that the price in the store had to be the same as or better than the price outside the store. And also, Apple had a requirement that you couldn't have the app send you outside the store to do the subscription. So this raised questions that what was going to happen to the Kindle app, because the Kindle app is Amazon's book publishing app, and it's highly popular on the iPad because Amazon has such a wide array of books, and they're usually very cheap. And like, I have the Kindle app, and under this subscription model that Apple had, I was wondering, and a lot of people were wondering, how can Amazon keep the Kindle app on the iPad or the iPhone once the deadline hit, which was, I guess, this week. Actually, the deadline was June 30th. So, because if you think about it, Amazon would have to give Apple a 30% cut on each book or each subscription or book sold, and then how could they make any profit? Because I'm sure Amazon's margin is not 30%. Well, Apple totally quietly retreated, and I guess there had been a revolt in the publishing world. So basically, content providers may now offer in-app subscriptions at whatever price they wish, and they are not required to offer an in-app subscription simply because they sell a subscription outside the App Store as well. So this means, for example, that the New York Times could let you get subscription content on a New York Times app by subscribing like on a website and paying the New York Times on a website, but having it pushed to you in an app on the iPad. And I think a lot of publishers are going to do that. On the other hand, some publishers might be willing to allow subscription sign up within the iPad and give Apple a 30% cut, just because they might think that they might be able to get more users that way. Because there are a lot of people I know I do a lot of impulse buying right on my iPad, and I don't like going to a website. So this is definitely a retreat by Apple, and I guess they decided that it just was too risky alienating content providers by having this policy of taking a 30% cut and requiring you to have subscription at the same price or better in the App Store. So this is going to mean just more and more content on your iPad. So it's good news for the consumer. So I'm psyched. Okay, let's go on to another topic, which is Cult of Mac has a really good article out on June 12th entitled "Why the iPad is a Pen-Based Tablet." And it's a very nice article by Mike Elgin. It really goes into this sort of debate that is going on between the Windows PC tablet world, people who are saying that, look, a tablet has to have like a pen input or a writing style is input, and that the iPad is defective because you can't do that. And then the iPad fans who are saying that the pen input people are totally wrong, that touch is the best way. And they make a good point. The Cult of Mac people make a good point that, you know what, in the long run, you're going to have both. And I think that's true because I don't have a stylus for my iPad, but I know I'm definitely looking into getting one because there are some apps, some note-taking app, like I guess, what is it, the Note Taker HD app, where it would be advantageous to have a stylus to do your little doodles and your little note-taking. And Cult of Mac basically says that there's a lot of new type of styluses coming out that are going to be helpful, and we should look out for them. And it says here, for example, there is a stylus for the iPad coming out later this month aimed at the education market, and it is more of a pen and less of a magic marker. It's called the Doceri Goodpoint, and the pen works with an app that rejects non-pen input when the pen is in use. That enables your hand to rest on the screen as you write, just as you would with paper. It even has an eraser on the top of the pen, just like a pencil does. So that's one issue with styluses, which is when you're writing, you're pressing on the iPad with part of your hand, and that can screw things up. So this Doceri Goodpoint sounds like a workaround. The Cult of Mac article also says there's a product called Nomad Brush, and it's designed to simulate a paintbrush and actually has a brush on the end. And there's another project, according to Cult of Mac, still in the works, which puts an iPad stylus on the end of a Sharpie pen, replacing the cap. So, I think this is a very good point that Cult of Mac makes, which is, why can't we have both? Why can't we have both a touch input, and for certain instances, why can't we have a stylus or a pen or something that writes on top of the iPad in the way we're used to writing with a pen or a pencil or a paintbrush? Okay, so one of the cool apps on the iPad that came out is another augmented reality app called String, and I linked to a little bit of a video on my blog, and it's kind of cool. The video shows the String augmented reality app, and the guy holds up, for example, an iPad to a painting, and instead of seeing the painting, you see some crazy animal come flying out of the painting. So this is a really cool augmented reality app. But I think augmented reality in the iPad could have really great uses in certain situations. For example, let's say you're in a museum and they give you an augmented reality app. You could hold up the app to, let's say, a famous painting, and maybe you would get all this sort of information about the painting as you're looking at the painting. Maybe all of a sudden the app would recognize the painting and then say, you know what, let me tell you more about Monet, and here are some more stats, and here's some more pictures about Monet. So augmented reality is very cool, and it looks like this String company or String app is doing its part to make the iPad more interesting. So you can see it at poweredbystring.com. Okay, so there's another app which may be creating some competition for the Square app, and that is Robert Scoble found a new app, or a new company trying to make an app for the iPad called ShopKeep. And the plan here seems to be that there's going to be an actual replica of a cash register on your iPad. And so Building, I guess 43 made this video. But in the video you can see this interface that turns the iPad into a cash register. And I guess people are going to be able to make transactions in it. Let's see if we can scroll further in the video. But it's just another way to make the iPad into a business app. And so I think we're going to see more and more cash register or payment apps and services on the iPad. Okay, I want to end with this story, which is that apparently someone is now selling an iPad that's going to cost $1.2 million. Well, it's going to cost $1.2 million because the company, which is London-based Kamayil Diamonds, according to MacNN, is offering what is called the world's most expensive iPad, a top-of-the-line model that normally retails for $700, but has been augmented with a kilogram of 18-karat gold and 300 carats worth of flawless diamonds, plus black diamonds for the home button, and a backing that raises its resale value to over $1.2 million. So this is pretty stunning, and it's pretty cool. MacNN points out that someone offered a gold-plated iPad. So who gets this? I guess somebody who's just got crazy amounts of money and is a big Apple fan. I mean, I wish I was that person. I wish I had crazy amounts of money because I am an Apple fan, and I would then get the $1.2 million iPad. Okay, thanks for listening to the iPad podcast by Macsfuture. And, again, remember this is a commercial-free, chit-chat-free podcast. And you could help out by giving it a positive review in iTunes. And feel free to send any comments or questions to macsfuture@gmail.com or leave a voicemail at 617-826-9676. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.